Pokémon has always been a franchise with some details that are better left unquestioned. This works for weird Pokédex entries, but it also works for like small towns with only 2 or 3 people living in them. There were limitations to how Pokémon games were made back in the day, and so the simple approach was basically the best approach. As times changed, more things were introduced in Pokémon games that made them appear more complex. But there are some things that never really changed, and that is not a good thing. So hey, I'm not so a stranger, and what about cities? Let's get into it. For most of this franchise's life, the smaller towns and often static cities in the Pokémon game world had a special charm to them. None of that really mattered and often was paired with very interesting visuals that made you forget how never-changing everything was. Most towns were just passing towns where you would heal your Pokémon and maybe have 1 or 2 conversations. And also deep down we knew that they kinda couldn't do a lot more than that since the scope of the games was still a small one. That did not stop them from trying and having bigger looking cities right from the get-go. Places like Celadon and Saffron City in Gen 1, Goldenrod in Gen 2, Rustboro in Gen 3, Jubilife in Gen 4, and probably the best example of them doing something that felt closer to what I imagined a Pokémon city to be, Castillo City in Unova. Still, even though Castillo City was made to be a huge metropolis with many different alleys and many different buildings, a street that mimicked rush hour and even had the sewers at a certain point, it was still a bit repetitive, albeit the peak of city design from the 2D era. And also, speaking of repetitive, it would be pretty awesome if you liked, subscribed or even joined the channel. But it was during the 3D era of Pokémon that people started becoming less acceptant of Game Freak's design of cities. It wasn't due to the visuals, it was due to the content. Before I continue though, what is your favorite city or town from the Pokémon world and why? Let me know down below. Kalos has beautiful, vibrant scenery, though most of its towns and cities suffer from the Pokémon curse, now even more noticeable in 3D. There isn't a lot to do in them. Still, it's here that we see the first 3D large city, Lumiose City. It has many different places to explore, a large part of the storyline happens there, it has Easter eggs and is a topic of conversation to this day even before the announcement of Pokémon Legends Z-A. It was far from perfect but showed us what perfect could be. It showed us that there was a likely very interesting future awaiting us in Pokémon games when it came to city designs. As we know now, it wasn't really like that though. Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire did not really change a lot from Gen 3, the original Gen 3, and that made sense, they were remakes. But when it came to the flagship games of Gen 7 and Gen 8, your Pokémon Sun and Moon and your Pokémon Sword and Pokémon Shield, they didn't really have a lot going for them when it came to cities. Gen 7 cities are mostly forgettable, despite Gen 7 having some of the best storylines in Pokémon games and some of the best visuals in my opinion. I mean, Howali City is nice to be in, to look at, but there isn't a lot to do that I remember. Sword and Shield also had some interesting cities. I mean, Motostoke and Hammerlock, they were pretty weird, pretty different looking, but they were glorified corridors as opposed to Spikemuth, which was literally a corridor. Winden City was supposed to be the Castilia or Lumiose City of Galar, and it was large, but what could you really do there? Buildings you can enter, a monorail that you can't ride. I'd call it a disappointment. I'd call that city exactly that. A game with very interesting visuals for the cities, but nothing to do in them. Just think of Balonlea for example. Beautiful, but empty. And speaking of disappointment, after this we went to Pokémon Scarlet and Pokémon Violet and experienced Mesagoza. I liked the academy, we have many classes there, there's lore in the library for you to discover, and they even give you a reason to just get away from that place and seek your treasure. You don't have to be there and they tell you that. But the city of Mesagoza should be a place where you want to spend your time. You should be able to find secrets, interact with NPCs and learn new things, but there's really nothing to do there. It is very large and it will take you some time to get around the whole place, but unless you want to visit the same shops over and over, it has nothing for you. This place suffers a lot with one of Scarlet and Violet's worst decisions, and that is not letting you into buildings. As weird as it is to think about, one of Pokemon's best features was letting you invade someone's privacy and force them into a conversation. Removing that just takes away a lot of what you used to do when in any town or city during your playthrough. It made it so Mesagoza really only was the academy and a handful of shops. Sure, you have the Ace tournament in the postgame, but how many times are you really doing that, and does it really matter? What we started noticing with the scope of the games that came with the 3D era was that they did not really bring better exploration in cities as much as they did point out the flaws in Game Freak's approach. They became bigger, that's for sure, but that doesn't mean anything. Basically, they're open areas with some buildings scattered around. There's nothing to do there, just run past it. Still, like I said a little bit ago, that the 3D era started with the best example, the best foundation for a 3D era city. Well, just like a hero going out on the training arc and then coming back to save the day, Lumiose City is here once again with Pokémon Legends Z-A. Pokémon Legends Z-A will happen entirely inside of Lumiose City, meaning that the city's appeal will have to be the main focus of the game if they want us to be interested in it. So far, the addition of wild zones and battle zones, with the latter giving the day and night cycle some meaning, is already a very interesting one, but from the trailers alone, we can see that this new Lumiose City will not only be different from the metropolis of Pokémon X and Pokémon Y, but likely different from any other city that we've had before. There seems to be a routine going on, with us seeing people jogging, having a chat, using technology, and of course, the fact that there will likely be side quests inside of the city, if Pokémon Legends Arceus is anything to go by, will probably have us explore every corner of this place and watch it change in the process. Of course, this is an extreme situation, one that basically forces them to create a city that feels alive, but to me, it is the perfect exercise for them to design the foundation for the cities of the future in the Pokémon world. Mesagoza did not have to be this Lumiose City, it just simply had to be more, just like Galar's big cities and Alola's big cities. They had to be something more, they had to give you a reason for you to want to be there instead of just wanting to get the hell out of that place as fast as possible. It feels like the more they do with exploring the overworld, the less they focus on exploring towns and cities. While before there was a balance between these two concepts, one is clearly taken over the other, creating a contrast that is becoming harder and harder to ignore as new generations are released and games start looking or trying to look more detailed. It was the same thing with caves. The bigger the scope of the games became, the shorter and less daunting the caves turned out to be. I might end up being wrong about Pokémon Legends Z-A and this new Lumiose City. After all I have to go by are these trailers we have and, well, the picture I believe they are painting. But I honestly believe what I'm saying. At this point, Lumiose City is looking like a place that went not only for size but also for essence. It is looking like a place that I want future Pokémon big cities to be modeled after. But hey, that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all on the next one. But before I go, I want to thank my YouTube members DashPlays and Yahtzee, and my Twitch subscriber Anubis here for going that extra mile. Thank you so much for all of your support.